Regeneration, and she'll be conducting the session on customer profiling for improved positioning in early markets. Karishma has spent over a decade working at the intersection of land systems, rural livelihoods, and restoration finance. And she's also co-designed land and water management solutions with smallholder farmers and built financing mechanisms to support rural communities. Karishma has worked across organizations like the Raintree Foundation, 8Tree Well Labs, and even WRI India. And at the heart of it all, her work is about building market systems that are both equitable and regenerative. So in today's session, Karishma will take us all through one of the most fundamental questions any early stage venture faces, which is who exactly is your customer and how do you create genuine value for them? She'll take us through key aspects like refining your ideal customer profile, understanding what drives or blocks customer adoption, and building value propositions that speak in terms of tangible ROI. So this session is also going to cover various practical insights around customer acquisition, retention, and pricing and go-to-market strategy. So with that, I'll hand it over to Karishma.
Thanks a lot, Ananya. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I feel extremely privileged to have met all of you. I have looked at all of your company profiles, and it's so inspiring. First of all, to see the work that you've been doing. It's not an easy market to be operating in, and with the kind of passion and the commitment that all of you have gone about, building your businesses, it's truly inspiring. First of all, so I just want to set that right in the beginning. So, and thank you, Wilgrow and WRI India, for giving me this opportunity to be interacting with this wonderful cohort. So, pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to all of you today, virtually and hopefully in person at some point. The session today is on customer profiling, customer acquisition, and looking at a little bit of looking at how brands have functioned and worked in the market. Now, one of the things that I just want to say at the very beginning is that we all are working towards one single goal in mind, which is building a restoration economy. But we also need to accept the fact that the restoration economy today doesn't exist. Right. A lot of examples of the brands that have done well globally and in Indian markets come from the FMCG and the corporate sectors. I am some of my slides today, and maybe some of the terminologies, some of the concepts may make you a little uncomfortable, but that is also the idea for us to get a little uncomfortable today with the idea that we want to be making profits at the end of the day. We want all of us here to be successful businesses. We all want to be growing at scales that helps us to achieve the goals that we've set for our companies, right? Which is why it could be a little provocative, and I'm happy to speak to you about it. And if there's a pushback, happy to take that as well. So I want to keep it as interactive as it can. If you've got ideas, if you've got experiences that you would like to share, please raise your hand, and we should be able to speak about some of these. And if there are places where you don't agree with what is being said, I would like to hear that as well. So with that, I want to let me just share my screen. Is it visible?
Yeah.
Ananya?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Great. Okay. So yeah, this was one of the first things that I wanted to say, that what really sells today in the market is not restoration. That cannot be the story of your product, and I'm really sorry to be saying it at the very beginning. We'll also get to how do we sort of make that shift, because and this is also a mindset that it's taken a while for me to move and shift towards. Right, I'm fully cognizant of the fact that we're all restoration businesses, but the fact is, let's look at when we are developing marketing plans for our respective products and commodities, the basic principles, when you look at your customers, when you look at, say, the competition, you look at the context, you look at the geographies that you're operating in, nobody really cares about restoration. And let's be honest about it. It's not a value that is a reason enough to buy a commodity. right? We're all passionate here, but the intention of today's presentation is also to be, can we be passionately profitable, right? The other thing that I also wanted to sort of point out is your competitor is basically a habit shift, a behavior shift that we want the consumers to adopt. It may not necessarily be a product. In some cases, it may be a product, but in a lot of cases, it's a habit that you're trying to shift. And when we think about customer acquisition, that is one of the first things that we may want to keep in mind. The other thing that I wanted to highlight, and especially for restoration-based businesses, is that your payer is your customer. It's quite possible, and in a lot of cases, the beneficiaries that we work with, which is our smallholder farmers, our FPOs, these are not necessarily your payers. They are not your customers. Which is why when we design, especially for our kinds of businesses, when we're designing any kind of customer acquisition strategies, or when we're designing our revenue models, etc., identifying and keeping in mind though that differentiator, and we'll speak a little bit about that later, is extremely important on who is your beneficiary and who is your payer, especially for organizations that have emerged out of where where the heart is in the good place and it's for a larger social good. We very often end up forgetting who is going to be paying, for what are they paying, and what does your product really get to the table, right? And these are some of the things that I want you to sort of keep in mind. Now, while having said that, there are some rules because we are competing with FMCGs, we are competing with other corporates and the private sector. And I also want to say it out aloud that as much as we can criticize their business model and their way of functioning and how brutal, extractive, and exploitive they can sometimes be, it is worth seeing how they have managed to get us to shift our behaviors and practices to be using certain commodities, which otherwise some of us would not be using at all, right? A clear classic example that my mentor always gave me is two things. How there's someone from an FMCG who managed to sell him a conditioner and he was bald, first of all. Second, how have all of us started to use hair conditioners, right? With shampoos. HUL convinced us that we need a conditioner to go with a shampoo, and it's become like a no-brainer for most of us today, right? So there are some universal rules which we should be applying to our businesses. And some of them which may not directly apply to restoration enterprises, but it's always worth looking at how can they be adopted to our more context and to our ethos, right? And what do those look like? First of all, unit economics is the queen, as I say it. If your economics doesn't work out, if it's not being able to, for you to be able to generate profits in the long run, you can do whatever you want in terms of set premiumization of your product and commodity. The business is not going to work out. I think most of us know this because we've been grappling with some of these issues. It's pretty obvious, but I think I also want to say some of the most obvious things, partly because we're all very emotional and passionate about the work that we do. And sometimes we aren't practical enough. But this is the core, this is the heart of it for all FMCGs and for all products that have been successful, profitable, and in the long run, the unit economics has always worked out for the entrepreneur. Second, customer retention over acquisition. And I'll come to this a little later, but your focus has to be retention and repeat customers over just acquiring of customers. The third is, let's not underestimate the customers on the other end. Farmers as well as customers are extremely rational buyers. And their basis of rationality comes from their own experiences, from their context, their geographies, their everyday life. And that is something that we should never underestimate. And finally, this is also something that I will touch upon towards the end of the presentation, but visibility wins. And let's not underestimate marketing and visibility, especially in the times that we're living in. Now, what are how does the rules specifically change for restoration-related enterprises, right? First of all, the value of the commodity gets split into private and public good. And what do I mean by that? Again, this is something we'll expand upon, but just to briefly talk about it here. When I say private is the commodity that you're producing. So in your cases, it could be some kind of a soil testing device. It could be a millet related commodity. It could be cereals. It could be just millets, grains, etc. Right? So that becomes the private part of it. Now, what is the public good? Public good is the benefits that your business is going to deliver on the ground, which is biodiversity, livelihoods, water, land restoration. Right? That is the public good. That is the public good for which your customer is not willing to pay in most cases. The private good is the value that most people are willing to pay for, right? And it's a little hard to imagine this, but it's a fact, and that's how the market functions. And let's find ways to sort of overcome some of those hurdles, right? But it's what I would like you to do is keep that value split about your business in mind. The next one is where your payer is not your beneficiary and is not your decision maker. And I think knowing this distinction is so important. Someone who's paying for a commodity, first of all, is not your beneficiary, so you can't treat them as your beneficiary. Third, they may not always be the decision maker. Um, uh, in some cases, they could be the decision maker. And when I say the decision maker, what does it mean? It basically means who decides that this commodity needs to be bought for the household, right? Keeping this difference in mind is important. And finally, and something that you will see me repeat multiple times in the presentation today, which is also one of the values that I think I stand by, whether that's across restoration and water projects or whether that's around social enterprises, demand must be curated and created. I am working with the basic hypothesis that the market for the commodities that you want to sell today doesn't exist. That means what all of us are here to do is how do we curate and create a demand for your commodity? And how are we being cognizant of the competition that exists from mass scale commodities, right? So that's what you will see me say multiple times and through some of the examples. But yeah. Okay. Now, I want to start with a book that I think all of you should read. It's a very fascinating book, and the book is called The Mom's Test, right? This section specifically talks about the Mom's Test. And what I would also wanted to do is go back and listen to some of the lectures by Rob Fitzpatrick. And the reason why it's very critical to sort of listen to this is there was a conventional way in which marketing was taught at business schools, right? And what was the conventional ways? They always spoke about a marketing plan should have the 3 C's, which is your customer, your competition, your context, and a couple of C's that I'm forgetting actually. Collaborators as well as your company, right? So that was the typical sort of marketing plan that most business schools would teach you. However, I, by the way, I'm also cognizant of the fact that for a lot of us here, it's not the commodity that came first. It was either a topic or an issue that's something we were very passionate about, and which is why we ended up creating the commodity or the product that we want to be selling in the market, right? And you're not an outlier in that manner. A lot of restoration-based social enterprises, for them, it came out of a passion project. It came out of something that they were very invested in personally through their personal stories, which is the case with most of you. And that is how they ended up setting their business. So whether that's Safe Harvest, whether that's Black Bazaar Coffee that I'm going to talk to you about, both of these are examples of how the founders there, Rangu as well as Arshia, both of them had a very close connection to the communities with which they ultimately set up these businesses with. specifically, let's talk about Safe Harvest, right? Safe Harvest came to become what it has become today, primarily because Rangu was working with Samaj Pragati Sahyog, which is an NGO that used to work with women farmers who used to grow or who still grow non-pesticide food products. Um, these non-pesticide food products did not have a market of their own, which is when Rangu decided to set up a Safe Harvest. It's a very inspiring story, and if you haven't heard of Safe Harvest, you should definitely go and look up their page on LinkedIn and listen to Rangu talk about the story of Safe Harvest. It's also very, very inspiring, right? Similarly with Arshia sort of, when she set up the Black Bazaar Coffee, she actually was doing her PhD on what are the market incentives for regen coffee. And that's how she ended up setting up Black Bazaar Coffee as we know it today. Now, the reason why I'm saying is that these could also be outliers in some way, but they're also connected to your cases. But what we can do going forward, because what I'm hoping for is that whatever commodities you're working with today, and whatever the scale of entrepreneurship your enterprise you are operating at today may not be limited to just this. You will be expanding to other products, other commodities, and to new markets. And when you do that, one of the things that becomes extremely critical is to actually create a product that is for your customer and not necessarily what is a passion project for you, right? There are outliers. There have been success stories, which is exactly why I'm saying that you're not alone in how you believe about your products and commodities. But the fact is that it may not always work, right? Which is why it is extremely important for us to understand who our customer is. Now, what is the mom test about? Coming back to the slide, and why do I say your market doesn't exist yet? It's a very simple idea that I absolutely love. It's like when you go to your mother and you go with an idea. Our mothers basically love us, right? Which is why if you go to an idea and you tell them that go with an idea and tell them that, hey, this is what I want to be doing. Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's going to work? Your mother will never tell you how disastrous your idea is. She will be so excited that you're trying to do something, and she'll be so supportive of you that she will always praise your idea. She will always tell you that you're the most awesome thing that exists on this planet. Now, that's not the kind of feedback that you as an entrepreneur need, right? What we need is somebody to critically evaluate your product, for somebody to be able to not protect your feelings and talk politely to you, but tell you why this won't work and why it may work, right? Somebody to be a little blunt and rude with you. Which is why it really depends on how you're asking the questions and who you're asking the questions to, right? Now, typically, I would have spoken about this slightly later, but I thought it's good to like put this out in the beginning. So when we actually come to the customer segmentation and the customer profiling sections, you've already thought about some of these things, right? So how should you be asking your questions about a specific commodity, right? And why are we asking these questions? We're basically asking these questions to figure out that if is there even a demand for your commodity in the market, first of all? If there is no demand, is there a possibility to curate a demand for your product? Therefore, the questions cannot start with the product. They cannot be about your product and commodity. They have to be about the person that you're talking to. It has to be about your customer, right? What you want to try and understand is what is typically a day in the life of your customer, right? What are the typical problems that they face? Is there a monetary consequence to the problems that they're facing? Is it costing them something? Does it come at an expense? What are they doing about it today? Have they made any changes to it? Have they tried making any changes to it? Are there other products or commodities that they've used to be able to address that problem? And if they are not doing it, why are they not doing it? Right? Most importantly, what is the economic sort of rationale for them for not adopting another practice or for shifting their behaviors? And is there a willingness to pay? very, very important. There is no point creating a product or a commodity for which there is no willingness to pay in the market, right? A customer is only a customer if they're willing to pay you for what you are producing. Let's get that very straight, right? And this also, the reason why I also want to emphasize is because as entrepreneurs, we're very often afraid of setting the right kind of pricing for our products, right? And we're always scared if we're asking for too much. And that's where I want to push back a little bit. And one is, of course, setting up a pricing strategy is a very critical and a strategic piece of coming up with the final strategy for your product, no doubt about it. But also asking for a premium because your market is willing to pay for it is something that you also need to figure out and is very, very critical. We'll come to a couple of examples of how people have done this, right? Finally, related to the question about are they willing to pay is who benefits, who pays, who signs off, and are they the same person? This again takes me back to one of my previous slides where I was talking about, if you remember, the one who pays for your product is not the same as your beneficiary, is not the same as your decision maker, right? So this finally connects to that question. So just to summarize, it's never about your product; it is about your customer. And you may have heard this several times, but I thought it's best to just outline this for you. Now, when you're talking to your customers, right, what are the three things that you should be keeping in mind and that you should not get blown away by? Compliment, fluff, and any feature requests, right? These are your red flags. If they are only complimenting you when you're asking for feedback, it doesn't hold good. You should always be asking more questions to dig deeper into if this is a genuine compliment or are they just complimenting you for the heck of complimenting you. The fluff, right? Like if they are exaggerating about just liking your product and saying things that that would also take you back a little bit in terms of why are they being so nice to me. That is again a red flag. Please do not get carried away. And finally, feature requests. If they end up asking you or saying things like, oh, maybe this should have a little more cardamom in it, or oh, maybe this doesn't look that good, can you make it look whiter, or this doesn't have this kind of data, it doesn't give me this kind of a service at this point of time, right? Just additional features is also a red flag in a way, right? So these are the three things to be a little careful about when you're also evaluating your product with your customer. Having said that, it doesn't mean that all compliments and all fluff and all feature requests should be completely sort of not be accounted for. But what I'm saying is that you need to go through a reiteration process with multiple customers and multiple data points to finally arrive at. But it also, again, goes back to how you design your questions and how are you asking questions about the product. So simply asking if your product is good, is it tasting good? Are my cookies tasting good? Is this coffee tasting good? Is the milk tasting good? Is not good enough, right? You really need to be able to dig deeper when interacting with your potential customers to be able to understand their needs and their requirement to even curate demand. And these are the three red flags that you can keep in mind, right? Now, I thought it's best to kill the elephant in the room before we move ahead. And that's primarily because what I want to be saying at the very sort of beginning again is that these are startups and companies that have failed over the past few years. And the primary reason for some of this happening is because their customer economics were never pressure tested. Which is exactly why also my emphasis on unit economics to you and on keeping your customer in mind at the end of the day, and especially keeping your paying customers in mind is extremely, extremely important. what were some of the common features? Because at the outset, all of the 5 companies that I've listed there, um, in your head should have succeeded just on the basis of the concept and the idea. In fact, some of them were path breakers in their own way, right? Raw pressery, for example. I don't know how many of us had actually heard about cold pressed juices before raw pressery. Like I had never heard of a sugarcane juice in a bottle being delivered to my office. And raw pressery did it, but it came at a cost. Basically, they were founded in 2016, 17, I think. They were at their peak valuation in 2018, 19. Then COVID struck. And finally, when they were acquired, I think by Wingreens in 2024, it was a fifth of its peak value, right? And one of the main reasons was, which again we'll touch upon a little bit today, is that they were looking to build a category rather than just selling the commodity. So they ended up creating this entire category of freshly juiced, freshly cold pressed juices. And fresh is what they were selling, but it actually didn't work out in the long run for them. Similarly, with the other examples out there, right? Greeneck, which tried to cut out the middlemen for the farmer, they shut down in 2024. Uber for tractors, that's Tringo. Again, it did not really work out. Because especially for the smallholder farmers, it wasn't going to make sense to be able to hire them, especially if you look at the unit economics of the farmer themselves. Same with Bharat Agri and Dudhwala. Interestingly, Dudhwala, which was trying to work on a subscription model with no market segmentation, failed terribly. But if you compare that to now Akshay Kalpa, which still functions in the premium category, they've been doing extremely well, and it's one of the more well-known regen restoration-related businesses today. So look up these guys as well and see what else you can learn from them. But I thought I should just say this aloud and put it out there first. Okay. This is the image that you see on your screen. Actually, I want to stop here. Any questions, any insights, anything else that you would like to share at this point before we move into the next segment? Yeah, happy to do that.
Yeah, you can either raise your hands or even share your questions or comments in the chat box, everyone, if whichever works best.
Okay. I'll move on. I'll maybe stop before my next section. And again, happy to take questions, know about your experiences with some of this as well. Okay, what I was saying is the picture that you see is very interesting. I think we've all seen the Fevicol ads growing up. And it's interesting because for us, Fevicol is no longer a brand. It's a segment by itself, right? For the longest time, we would go and ask for Fevicol, which was equivalent to a glue or a gum. I don't remember us asking for a glue or a gum. We would end up asking for Fevicol, which is the same with Colgate and Xerox for that matter. So this segment specifically will focus on customer acquisition and retention. We'll also touch a little bit upon concepts such as the STP, which is your typical marketing concept of segmentation, targeting, and positioning. We'll talk a little bit about the brands, what they've been doing, and where they are and how they got there here. And happy to listen to some of your views on this as well. So, okay, not able to. Okay. Now, one of the things that I want to sort of say that I think is important to point out is that frequency really decides your economics, right? So while we touch upon how do we do market segmentation, how do we look at how do we look at targeting customers, and how do we look at positioning our brand. While we get down to those nitty gritties, I think what is also important to know is that frequency. And when I say frequency, it basically means how frequently your customers need and demand your product. Also has an impact on one, the retention of your capacity to earn retention from your customers. Second, on the pricing, um, uh, uh, and in determining your marketing strategy overall, right? To give you a very simple example, a milk product versus a bajra millet cookie, right? Now, Akshay Kalpa basically came up with a model whereby you could subscribe to it on a monthly or a sort of a 6 monthly, quarterly, or an annually basis as well, right? Now, this is, and you could also decide the frequency for most households, especially in the Bangalore constituency. It became either daily or once in 2 days, once in 3 days, right? And therefore the ability of them to be able to sort of their economics of their commodities would be very, very different as compared to a millet cookie, which is basically looked upon as a snack. And which maybe, consumers may end up buying it once a week, or maybe once in 2 weeks, sometimes once in a month. um, you don't know, right? So this really also determines the way you will have to decide on multiple customer acquisition strategies as well. And that is something to keep in mind. Um, the other important thing to remember, and I also said this before, is customer acquisition is different as custom versus customer retention, and that's where it relates to this point, which is that the frequency also decides your economics and decides your customers, right? Um, for example, customer acquisition could primarily be about just a marketing hype, right? Especially if you are a B2C customer, or even if you are a sort of a B2B customer in some case, it could just be a sort of a blown out marketing strategy on social media that you might have, which may get somebody to try your product. Or there could be other incentives in place, such as discounts, cashbacks, or just aggressive advertising, right? But that doesn't mean anything in the long run, especially, and I think most of you would know that. The focus, therefore, of what we should be chasing is customer retention and repeat customers. Right, that becomes your sort of point of something that you need to be focusing on as a product strategy, right? Because what happens with customer retention is then it's about product, it's about trust, it's about daily habit. And it's also sometimes about you solving a recurring pain point in the life of your customer, right? And the retention is something that is not really bought with discounts. It is something that is gets it basically means that you've screwed into the walls of a household. um, uh, uh, to give you a very simple example, I mean, there's Ruh Afza here. We've known Ruh Afza, again, it's been around for the last 30, 40, 50 years. I don't even know if they do any advertising anymore. We just know it as a sharbat. And it's something that is very commonly seen during festivals, during Eid, in households, and which is like a rose syrup equivalent would always be a Ruh Afza. Like that's the first thing that comes to your mind, right? Um, the other sort of example is also well, say if you're using a specific type of a cereal or a cornflakes at home, right? If people have got experimental, but there could also be a specific customer category that you may have figured out, who may only want a specific type of a cereal because they either like the taste of it, and it's become a part of their routine. what you're trying to solve for there is the breakfast problem of, say, a lot of urban consumers where they don't have to think what to eat in the morning, right? And if they maybe like the taste, the mix of your specific breakfast cereal, then they will just stick to it for on a repeated basis because it solves a problem for them. And I think that's where the catch is. It's mainly customer retention is what our products should be focusing on, versus just acquiring one-time customers, and that really becomes your benchmark then, right? Um, Now, this is something that I want to sort of again talk about a little bit because I'm not sure how many of you have done these calculations. It's maybe you've done it and you're sort of like far ahead of some of the other folks, but this is sort of yes, Sudha.
Hi.
Hi, yeah,
Session is going good. Thank you for keeping it more engaging. And most of the things when it comes to customer acquisition and we want to give an emotional connect to our product, we are somewhere stuck up in the tech. So tech
correct,
driven, tech
correct,
driven, how do we market? That's a big hurdle
correct,
for us. And we are
correct,
unable to calculate exactly the customer acquisition cost. But that because it's low compared to any D2C brand or what I'm trying to
correct,
directly deliver, it's very, very
correct,
less comparatively. But a
correct.
complete bifurcation, how to do it for a tech-driven kind of a product is something I would like to learn from this end of this
Sure,
session.
sure. No, that's a
Thank
good
you.
point. I've made a note of it. Let's go through the slides, and maybe I'll come back to this either towards the end, or somewhere in between. I'll just make a reference to it. You're absolutely right. Um, Typically, tech-driven solutions in agriculture have not worked that well. And this comes from a lot of agri-tech startups, right? And one of the reasons that they say is not because again that the cost of customer acquisition may be very high or whatever. I think it's more about repeated usability of a specific product and convenience. And it could also be about the ability of just the nature of agriculture in India, right? Um, and it's a question back to you, Sudha. I'm wondering if this is a factor of just the type of customer profile that you have, which could be a smallholder farmer in India, as compared to if you were functioning in any other geography. Because if that is the case, then maybe that's something that we'll have to talk about in terms of if your tech-based solution needs to go more institutional or if it needs to go to a single farmer, right? Because sometimes that could also make all the difference. And I'm sure you've explored some of this, but would love to hear from you if
Yes.
that is something that you've thought about as well.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. And we have observed this, the customer acquisition cost is geographic specific.
Correct. Yeah.
We have worked in Odisha, we have worked in UP, Gujarat, and Tamil Nadu, Kerala. Everywhere is different. Tamil Nadu, Kerala,
Correct.
they're high paying customers, repeat customers. Odisha is very marginalized. They are like you, almost like 10 rupees, 5 rupees, something they expect us to give, which doesn't fit in. UP, it's like a mix. It happens
Correct.
through partners because they have a lot of agri activities are more in UP. So it's
Right.
easy to
Correct.
juggle off and the customer
Right.
acquisition cost is less. So it's more towards the ecosystem you're trying to enter into. For us, it has
Right.
come like that. So that's how my customer acquisition cost is less now. But it's
Right.
again varying on many, many factors. And like
Right.
one single formula is not coming out.
Correct. Absolutely. And I think that is so. Uh, what you see the formula on the left is a basic way to come up with what a cost of customer acquisition is, CAC. This is something that you always need to keep in mind. I think what a lot of you then have to pay attention to is the gray circle there. Because like I was saying, for a daily milk subscriber, the cost of customer acquisition would be much lower as compared to that of like a fortnightly snack buyer, right? because what it means is that a daily milk subscriber is the customer is paying you about 15,000 rupees annually versus someone who's buying your cookies say 3-4 times a year and is spending some 400-500 rupees on it, right? So it may not always be so don't look at it from like a single lens, just as the way Sudha was pointing out. There are multiple factors that have to be accounted for, but it's also important to have this calculation as part of your overall product strategy. If that is something that you've not looked at, is what I wanted to say, while keeping the example of what type of a product you're saying in mind. Very often what happens is that we don't even we're not even taking some of this into account, or what we're doing is maybe, or maybe the other way to also look at it is there scope for us to be able to expand our marketing budget a little bit, um, uh, 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 to acquire customers, right? That it also gives you an insight into where there is an ability for me to be able to increase my budgets to acquire new customers, right? That is another way of looking at CAC, of analyzing your CAC overall, right? Because there are multiple social media platforms today, there are multiple networks as well as institutional channels that you will have to explore. Um, and yeah, going beyond your typical traditional conventional ways of marketing is something that we'll have to look at. So that was one of the things that I wanted to that takes me to the next sort of point. And I'm also apologies that some of this will be very consumer focused and FMCG focused commodities and products, and may not fully speak to those that are tech based and instrumental in nature, but we'll try to address that through either giving similar examples, or looking at other ways in which we can address that. But I do want to sort of point out that that is one of the shortfalls of the session today, that it's a little more focused on consumer commodities and consumer products as compared to, say, tech-based solutions. But I'm hoping that some of the principles that we share today is something that will give you some food for thought. So coming to, in terms of producing with the customer in mind, I have two examples here, and they are again very contrasting in nature. One is a regen business on your left, which is Black Bazaar Coffee. And the second is, what you see is a sachet of chick shampoo, right? I don't know how many of you know, but India has been one of the greatest customer product fit inventions in India has been the sachet, and that was specifically for the rural market. Um, uh, that's because, and that's also a great example of how we adopted global successful examples into the Indian market, right? So therefore, when we say producing with the customer in mind, is not only about production of the commodity there. It is also about it's also about packaging. It's also about sizing. It's and these things do matter. India is an extremely price sensitive market, is what you need to keep in mind, right? So the way shampoo sachets of 1 rupee, 2 rupees took the rural market by storm. It completely changed the way people were consuming um, 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 you know, uh, commodities like shampoos and conditioners, right? The other thing to also keep in mind is, what is your overall goal, right? And I'm sort of apologizing for some of the examples that I'm going to give, um, because you need to know who you're competing with, and therefore you need to know who your customer is, right? And I know some of you are dealing with like white label commodities overall, but just to give you an example of, there are a lot of white label brands in rural India today that are running profits into thousands of crores, and have absolutely no branding, no marketing. It's just the price point that works well for them. And I know that it is not fully applicable for the kind of businesses that some of you are running. But also to keep in mind that sometimes keep. I think on the white label commodities, and one classic example would be a detergent and phenol. A plain white detergent in a plain transparent packet or a Finel, one of your those fluorescent pink and greens. And if you go and look into their financial statements, they are making revenues into crores, right? Because what they've cracked is a need in the rural market for that commodity, and they've cracked it well, right? Without your fancy packaging and marketing and all of that. So also to keep some of those things in mind, primarily to understand from the perspective of who your customer is and is the price point going to work for them, right? Now, the reason I keep coming to Black Bazaar is Black Bazaar has always invested in its community while trying to understand what is the gap in the Indian uh, coffee market overall, right? Now, remember, Black Bazaar was awarded a sustainability prize last year, and Black Bazaar is flourishing in a time where you have the big brands like Sapco, Third Wave Coffee, you've got Blue Tokai, who are doing extremely well, who've raised Series A, Series B funding from the market, and in those kind of extremely competitive coffee market, the big and sort of bulging coffee market in India, you have Black Bazaar, who's carved a niche for itself, and if you should definitely go check out their website if you haven't. They have a beautiful story behind each of their sort of coffees, and also with the communities that they work with, right? So very solid brand positioning. They know who they are targeting. They also do small batches, so they are not a mass. They don't do mass production. They do small batches, and they have figured what the mix of coffee and the pricing should look like. I would say it is a premium brand. So for all of you who are working in the premium category, do check them out. Um, the next example, and I think I've spoken of Akshay Kalpa a couple of times. I may speak about them another, primarily because I think this directly relates to some of the work that regen and restoration based companies are pursuing. Akshay Kalpa did not start with the objective of making organic milk based products. If you go and look at the story of Akshay Kalpa, it started because they wanted to restore some land outside of Bangalore, and wanted to work on, a bunch of things that was related to supporting smallholder farmers, and seeing how their incomes can be improved. And that is where the idea of Akshay Kalpa and milk came about. Um, Similarly, one of the other examples that I always give, and this is about, again, about finding your niche in the market. And I know today Amul may be one of the biggest milk cooperatives in the world, but if you still go back and look at how Amul started off, they had only one goal in mind. They wanted to sell milk, and they wanted to sell milk produced by the small women-held self-help groups in and around Gujarat, right? That is how some of these brands sort of curated, or not even curated, stumbled upon what their product fit is going to be, right? The point that I'm also getting to is when you're starting off, and I think some of you are a little much ahead in that journey, but this also applies to if you're exploring a new segment, if you're exploring a new customer base, um, do not go wide, instead go narrow, right? Look at, and I would highly recommend to look at one category that might work. See how you can make, say, figure out what your product differentiation there is, see what works for your customers, and then think about expanding within that new category if you want to explore. This is like a basic thumb rule. I'm sure most of you know of, but I thought it's nice to point out these two examples of Akshay Kalpa, as well as of even Black Bazaar coffee for that matter, as well as Amul. They all, it's a commodity, right? It's coffee. In this case, it was milk. Even in the case of Amul, it was milk, right? Now the trap that some of us fall into right, is where we believe that because the market doesn't exist for our product, and this is it may feel like it's contrasting one of my previous slides on the market doesn't exist. But the point here is that you are not responsible to create the market yourself, right? It's extremely important that we also, again, keep the unit economics in mind. It is not your responsibility alone to build the market, to create the awareness, to do the farmer education, because then you'll end up being like a raw pressery, right? So what I'm suggesting is that always keep the unit economics in mind. Um, um, Study your customers, study what the need is, see how you can curate a demand and create a demand for your commodity and product. And if it's not working, drop it. Right? You should have a time frame within which, if you feel like, don't get caught up in the trap, because sometimes as entrepreneurs, and especially as social entrepreneurs, we're extremely emotional about some of the products and commodities that we're developing. But I would sort of push you a little bit to see that if it's not working, for whatever, give it a year, give it 18 months. If it's not working, drop it, right? If especially if you've got no traction in the market. Because otherwise it's and I know this doesn't sound very pleasant, but it's a trap, and it's can be not financially viable for you in the long run, and therefore it's always better to explore sometimes what the market is also looking for. Sorry, did anybody have a point? Yeah, the other point is, yeah, just connected to what we were just talking, is acquiring a customer is, again, not necessarily you're acquiring a market, right? That is also something to, that's the distinction that you would also want to keep in mind. So sometimes if you're working with a commodity or a product for which the market doesn't exist, first of all, it's not your job to sometimes maybe create a market, because that's a Herculean task by itself. Also, creating a market, there are a lot of like structural issues that you will have to deal with. Whereas acquiring a customer is more of a sales and a distribution job, right? It reflects the ability of an individual or a household or an institution, and the willingness to pay for a product or service. And you're specifically trying to address a pain point, versus sometimes in a market, what happens with the market is, if you're addressing a market and not a customer, you're trying to solve for a beast, which may not always be a useful strategy to take. Which is why being customer centric is extremely important. Which also takes me to my next segment, which is basically about looking at the STP framework to get to your ideal customer profile, right? Maybe I'll cover this quickly and then stop to take questions. So first of all, let's break down these terminologies here. I'm sure a lot of you would have again heard of this, but let's just get down to the basics, and then we'll move into slightly more complex ways of understanding and breaking down with some brands, right? First of all, segmentation, and what do we mean by them? What do we mean by segmentation? Segmentation is basically about what are the kind of customers out there, right? It's the larger market segment that we're looking at, and the type of customers could be. It could be based on geography. It could also be based on demographics. It could be based on psychographics. It could be based on behaviors, right? And that is the split, and that is the analytics that you will have to do. Segmentation is all about just knowing the different types of customers out there, and then deciding, which then brings us to the next point on targeting, which is deciding which is the type of customer do you want to go after, right? And getting very, very particular and sticky about it. What ends up happening very often, especially with the products and commodities that we end up, coming up with, we're very generic in nature. Sometimes if you're, it's like, and it's not that those types of products don't work. But it really depends on the kind of markets you're dealing with, right? Um, uh, Going back to the example of Black Bazaar coffee, like I said, Black Bazaar is thriving at a time when you have other big brands with who also may have the same value system, right? In terms of farmer-centric coffee and all of that. But we'll have bigger capital than say a Black Bazaar, right? But what I want to try and get to is Black Bazaar exists at a time where Nescafe, which is a more generic coffee, right? Nescafe is something that you'll find in most households as coffee, right? But while there is a customer for a Nescafe, there's also a customer for a Black Bazaar, and there's also a customer for a Blue Tokai and for a Sapco, right? Or for a Starbucks for that matter. And I think just knowing the market that you're going to target and is becomes extremely important, and that then gets us finally to the positioning of your brand, right? So the process of STP is to do two things. One is to get to your brand positioning, and the second is to get to your ideal customer profile. That is something that we'll touch upon in this segment. Okay, so a few sort of a few terminologies here, and let's break them down a little bit. Now, this is specifically to do with, I'm sorry, I don't have a picture here, but it's to do with this brand called Slurp. Not sure if you've heard of it, look it up. Slurp was founded by two mothers in 2016. It's a millet-based brand, and what it claims to replace is a lot of mother and mom related products for children with healthy alternatives. So they've got a cereal for kids, and I think they've also now moved into noodles and other such commodities. No added sugar, healthy, and yeah. So they've been around for about 7 to 8 years, and they now have, I think, a sort of a market of about between 75 to 80 crores. And they're one of sort of the leading well-known brands on Blinkit, on fast commerce, basically quick commerce, right, as well as on Amazon, and those are the kind of other platforms that they've managed to capture an audience, their customers well enough. Now, taking that brand, what I've done is there are three concepts that I want to try and get your attention to, and something that you can do with whenever you think about your marketing strategy overall. So let's get down to the market segmentation piece. And here, then the core question becomes on who has the money and who has the attributes to pay for something like a Slurp, right? And it's obviously wealthy urban parents. So their segment is very clear. In fact, I would say it's not even a wealthy urban parents. It'll be like a working mother, to be more specific, right? Who probably may not have the time in the morning to make that ragi kheer for the kid, or to make like a healthy breakfast, right? So Slurp is a great alternative. The second comes to a core question around customer segmentation, right? What do they value in a brand overall? And again, these are parents who would prefer organic food because they are more aware of the health benefits, etc. Finally, customer slicing. And this is where you would answer the question of like, what are they actually doing and why, right? Uh, um, and so a good example here would be, again, like I've been saying this, that the mom who's basically feeding her, instead of feeding like junk food, you would want an healthy alternative, right? And what the stable also gives you is how do you use each of these sort of frameworks to be able to arrive at your ideal customer type, right? So market segmentation will basically give you a sense of what are the types of customers that are existing in the market, while customer segmentation actually gives you and gives you an opportunity. Once you've arrived at the segment that you want to target, it can be used to create your brand's aesthetic and messaging, right? So that is where this can be used. Finally, customer, when it comes to customer slicing, it's super useful to actually design the actual features of the product that you want to put out in the market. So if I now go back to the sequencing of what we've been learning from the beginning, so we have the mom's test, right? Where what are the type of questions that you want to be asking your mother to be able to get very honest responses rather than getting polite responses. One of the practical ways to do that is to use the whole market segmentation, and customer slicing exercise, because that really then gives you the the type of questions to be able to then design your product better. Now, what should your ideal customer profile look like? And this is, I've tried to simplify it as much as I could. Two things to keep in mind: attractiveness and what does attractiveness mean. Here it's about who's in more pain, who can pay, and who is reachable, right? In the case of Slurp, it was fairly clear it's the working mothers or mothers with who have like other care work and therefore not enough time to do the fancy healthy cooking. Now these mothers can pay and they're reachable, right? Which also then determines the ability of this customer profile to serve you profitably, right? This is something that you should definitely sort of think about more deeply if you aren't already. And the reason this is also what I feel may make a lot of us uncomfortable, because sometimes our relationship with just making extreme amounts of profit is a little scary, right? Because just because of the kind of social ethos that we all have, we just want people to use our products, we just want people to use our commodities, so that the communities that we're working with will benefit, right? And we want to do it in the most equitable manner in which we can. We want to do it in a way that's ecologically sustainable and all of that. But again, apologies to be sounding a little brutal, but if you are not making profits and if you are not going to survive, you're not going to be able to restore anything, right? And therefore, keeping some of these aspects of customer acquisition in mind is extremely critical. Finally, that gets me to position and messaging. And the reason why you see the nano car there is because this is a classic example for how even a big brand like Tata completely failed in what was supposed to be the most innovative product in not just for the company. There was a lot at stake, if you remember when Tata Nano was launched, but also overall for for the politics of it as well, right? Now, and it's absolutely, now when we look back and when we connect the dots, it's it's interesting to see how even a company as big as Tata's did not really understand the aspirations of people, did not understand the aspirations of the Indian middle class. Now, Tata Nano came up with this grand idea of how every Indian should have a car, and it's going to cost you not more than ₹1,00,000, right? Very fascinating idea. It was basically targeting all of your motorbike and two-wheeler users. So that was one. Second, it failed miserably. Like the Nano doesn't exist anymore, right? And we if you look at it as a case study, it's quite surprising, because when Reliance launched its mobile phones, it had the same messaging, right? Every Indian should own a mobile phone. So what is the difference between a Tata Nano failing versus a Reliance or a Jio sort of capturing a significant amount of market share, right? It was really about understanding the Indian context and the aspirations of the people out there, right? Tata Nano was seen as the poor man's car. I don't think anybody wants to be seen as poor in India, right? That was one. Also, the aspiration of somebody who's on a two-wheeler is to own a four-wheeler. but they don't want to be seen in a nano, right? And I think that is where the brand positioning went terribly wrong. The understanding of what the customer wanted was not there. Second, one of the reasons why people also used a two-wheeler, it wasn't always affordability, right? It was also convenience, especially in Indian cities. Um, so, eh, so they got a lot of things in terms of just understanding their customer profile completely wrong, as compared to like just the phone, right? What happened when the Reliance phones were launched, if you remember, one is it completely took a Vodafone and an Airtel, who were the only, and I think there was Idea that also existed at that time. It took them completely by surprise. It also crashed just the cost of making calls and sending messages across India, right? So having a mobile phone then became aspirational, right? And it was, if you go back and just look at both of these studies, um, in comparison, it's very interesting how both wanted every Indian to have their product, but just understanding the customer profile changed the way things landed for both of these brands. Now, I actually want to show you a video. I don't know if it's going to play, but let's try. Is this visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay,
We
okay, great.
can't hear any audio though, in case that's relevant.
Oh, you can't hear the audio?
No, not at
Uh, okay, let's try here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Karishma's frozen.
I think yes.
Yeah. Okay, we'll maybe just give it a few minutes.
I think Karishma has joined from another system.
Wait, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
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 we can hear
just
you.
Okay. I'm not going to experiment with the video, but what I'll do is I'll just post the link here. Um, and maybe we can all watch it on our respective phones. Like it's not more than 30 seconds. But there's a story behind it, and which is why I wanted to share this with you. So let's just do that. Um, okay. It's a very famous ad. I'm sure all of you've seen it, but let's just jog our memories a little bit. Okay. So so this is it's the Nidma ad from 1989, which went viral. And this was basically in competition to Surf, which was launched by HUL at that point, right? The reason why this becomes very interesting is if you paid attention to the last line that the woman in the ad said. She said that it's cheaper, it's better in quality, and it serves my purpose. So why should I buy the more expensive one, right? Now, this is a very typical Indian customer, and I don't think um, well, there has been a little bit of a shift in the way the Indian customer is thinking, at least in the urban markets. But I would largely like to believe that it's still a very small category. And if that is not who you're targeting, if you're not targeting the premium luxury customers, it is extremely important for your product to be able to have that value creation for your customer, for them to be able to make the switch, right? And getting them to make the switch is one of the harder things to do. And the customer slicing approach is what is going to help you to be able to understand what your customer wants, and how do you sort of get them to make the switch. Now, a classic example is again Safe Harvest, right? They've been working in the non-pesticide category. Now, they've not had an easy journey, right? It's because primarily they are not organic. It's not an organic brand, and they don't claim to be an organic brand. But the kind of thorough tests and checks that the process of that a safe harvest commodity goes through is could be very well certified as organic, right? Also, their brand positioning on why they charge what they charge is um, very sharp and hits the customer, hits the target customer uh, very well, right? So couple of things there that you should definitely go and again study a little bit about Safe Harvest. First of all, their brand positioning is very clear. It's a pesticide-free brand that works with smallholder farmers. It goes through a series of uh, tests, which means it's all traceable, right? And they also make a very interesting point whereby they say that um, because they test it multiple times, it means that the entire process from the farm to the table is overall clean. Now, that is the traceability that a safe harvest has managed to establish. And I think that traceability and the credibility is what is going to allow you to charge a premium to your products and commodities. Now, it's going to be slightly different from the FMCG group here, right? Who's also, in fact, your direct competition. Now, the reason why I'm also saying that is because for Safe Harvest and the category that Safe Harvest is working in, now Safe Harvest is working as a B2C brand. Um, where is Safe Harvest found? It's found on Instamart, Blinkit, so all of your quick commerce, Amazon, and it is found in stores and shops in selected cities, right? Um, and you can make purchases online, I think, from their website also now, if I'm not wrong. Now, they have a clear value proposition. They have established their processes thoroughly over the past decade or so, right? And one of the things to sort of understand from them is that they are directly competing with the likes of Tata Sampann, with the likes of Patanjali, with the likes of Amul now, and a couple of organic brands like Organic Sattva and others, right? What has now couple of things to remember here. First of all, the margins on what Safe Harvest sells as a commodity, which is your cereals, is very low, right? That is not where they are going to be able to make the cut. That's not where they make their profits and their revenues from, first of all, which also means that when you are looking at multiple commodities as part of your brand, that is a trade-off that you will also have to think about as you grow from being like a single if you're not, first of all, if you're not a single commodity brand, and if you're doing multiple commodities, that is something that you will have to think about, right? uh, The second is they figured who their customer was, right? And they figured what they've managed to do is capture that customer and capture that customer on a repeated basis, while also understanding that this is what my customer wants and this is what also my customer wants. So somebody who's buying the pesticide free sugar from them might also want to look at pesticide free honey from a safe harvest, right? And that is how they've grown over time. And if you look at the kind of variety that they right now offer is, I think, what some of you may also have the aspirations towards moving to, right? Now, that is one way of also capturing the market. But when you do that, the thing to remember is that the unit economics again for each product is different. The margins on a biscuit may be a lot more as compared to the margins on, say, a moong dal or a basmati rice, etc., right? Or for that matter, even millets, right? And it really boils down to the unit economics. And in fact, when I had a conversation with the marketing head of Safe Harvest, and I ended up asking him if you had to go back and what is the one change that you would make to your business strategy. What he ended up saying is that I would hire a chief business officer. And the reason for that is that just because you have a good product doesn't mean that there is a demand for your product, and it doesn't mean that your product is going to sell and somebody is going to pay you for it, right? Let's just work with that premise in mind, is that first of all, there isn't a market for it. Nobody's asking you to make what you're making right now. And if you've created and if you've produced something, you then also need to curate and create a demand for it, right? And which is where whatever we've spoken until now about market segmentation, about customer acquisition becomes extremely critical. These are a few more. I mean, I've spoken about Nirma, spoken about Slurp, and then Thi is another multi-millet noodle brand, which is something that you should also look up, has a very similar background story. I'm not going to get into it. This is something that we've again discussed. So I'm going to briefly touch it about how it's finding the right few paying customers, and the terminology for that is beachhead. You first acquire the narrow, and then you sort of go into acquiring the adjacent segments. So basically, you use segmentation as a tool, as a sequencing tool, but it's not necessarily for survival. So that is something to keep in mind, right? I want to stop there and see if you have any questions. This is the last section, but before I go into that, I would, also either questions or anything else that you want to add, you want to share. Are there examples that you know of that would have done this and that you would like to share with all of us? Please go ahead.
Yeah, Karishma, while folks maybe raise hands or share more questions, I think there was an interesting comment for the customer acquisition bit by Prajwal from Oscillo Machines. I would have invited him to speak about it, but I think he had to drop off due to some other commitments. But what he said is that the CAC can go down as a product makes any relevance or impact in the lives of the customer, and for farmers, cash flow plays an important role, and the the crop they choose is the cash flow. For a startup like Oscillo building an electric machine, they're always thinking when they can hit the critical mass by spending on fuel in terms of the spend on marketing to achieve and sustain sales. And I think there was an interesting insight that Divya shared from the WRI team on how the CAC often decreases. This is an insight from previous LA cohorts on how the CAC decreases as customers experience the value of the product and trust builds, word of mouth starts driving adoption. So many founders also wrestle with the question of how much to invest in market development before it reaches a tipping point where the customer traction begins to generate its own momentum. So I would maybe invite, before Karishma comes in, if any of you would also want to share your insights along these lines or anything else, you could maybe come in, and Karishma, then you could probably add your ear to that.
No, absolutely. I mean, seconding everything that Prajwal put out there, and also the what Divya was saying about the CAC going down. It obviously remains variable. It changes from time to time depending on the local context. And yeah, those points are well taken. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll in fact talk a little bit about it on why visibility is very, very critical, especially for the kind of brands that we are building out here, right? And to know how much to spend on marketing, visibility, branding, it's a hard call, but I think those that's also the reality of the times that we're living in. That jo dikta hai wo bikta hai. So that is something that we need to. Something that a lot of us are not very comfortable with, but need to pay a little more attention to.
Would anyone else want to come in with any questions or just thoughts based on their own experience with the whole journey of identifying your customer profiles or any challenges you may have faced? It would be useful to have that exchange for the entire group. Okay.
Okay. I think I'll move on and maybe we can take comments, feedback, and open it up to everybody else after this section. Now, this is a slightly interesting sort of section, and I'd love to sort of get your thoughts on it. It combines a little bit of financing for what we want to be producing as restoration businesses, regeneration businesses, and how do we really translate the impact that we intend to have on the communities that we work with into value, and who's really paying for it, right? Taking me back to one of the points that I made in my previous presentation, where your payer is not equal to your beneficiary, is not equal to your decision maker. So keep that in mind. First of all, value is not a virtue, and we got to be translating impact into the payer's ROI. Now, this is extremely important as far as your customers are concerned, right? It's not about the upfront price. It's about the long-term perceived value, especially in the case of some of the products, commodities, and tech that we're dealing with here, right? If your customer thinks that there is a long-term value in making the shift towards a specific technology, towards a specific behavior or a habit, they will pay you for it, right? But that is for something that we need to unlock, right? Um, and if there is no value proposition there, what you're basically looking at is just a feeling and not really a brand. I know like some of these things are really hard to sort of deal with and grapple with. But the fact is that we got to be thinking of our commodities as creating some kind of a long-term value for our customers to be able to help them make the shift, right? And the unit economics that needs to work out for the customers as much as it has to work out for some of us, right? Um, take the case of EV. You do see the way the EV market has developed over the past 5 to 7 years. And this is something that I also grapple with, right? Because working in the regeneration restoration space, my competition is directly with the energy market. First of all, just the scale at which the capital investment is driven to energy projects is much bigger as compared to like restoration and NBS projects. And I don't mean to be in any which way diverting from what we're talking about here, but what I mean to say is that the EV market today has a very clear value proposition in terms of why you should be shifting to EV, right? And that it's happening at about 2-3 scales. One is the government support and the government push towards EV. The second is just the tech is improving, right? Initially, EV was supposed to be feasible for only city runs within cities for short distances. Now, the way the tech has evolved, it's so impactful that you can actually do multi-city or intercity with maybe just one charge, depending on for like 400, 500 kilometers sometimes, and it's value for money, right? So I think creating that a long-term value for your customers is extremely important. With some of the tech companies, especially the ones that are part of the cohort, I would love to sort of understand from you if you've actually done an exercise with some of your customers in seeing how the kind of instrumentation or the kind of analysis and analytics that you can give to your customers is there do they sense that there is some long-term value that you can create for them, and how have they responded to that? Yeah, Sudha, go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, we work with marginal and small scale farmers. We found it very difficult when we put the test price high. I mean, what the market players were giving, we also
Correct.
positioned in the same line. Suppose price X, we also put price X only. We thought that may be the apt price, irrespective of my unit economics and CAC and all. I just followed what the market was already there. We were unable
Yeah.
to move. Then what I've done is it's now based on my unit economics because I have a strong tech. I'm able to give at a very low price. Now the question for myself, I'm just thinking is okay, the first moving advantage I will get because I have a price very, very less. Like I've reduced like 10 times or maybe 5 times what
Right.
X by 5.
Right.
Now, if I want to increase, it will be a challenge for me only. So, how do I tackle this? Is the thing that I'm looking at because I had to enter, I had to launch. I'm okay coming down, but somewhere I have to be sustainable. I have to grow. I have to make a brand. So, how do I come to that X again? Now I'm that X
Correct.
by 5. How do I come back to that X? See, some people have told you how to do it gradually. But still, I'm finding it very difficult with the customers and the segment what we are working in because the farmer, like, you see, even I go to a market, if somebody is giving me onion,
Right.
even 5 rupees less, I will choose that
Correct.
only.
Correct.
Similarly, with the
Correct.
farmer also, it's a very price sensitive market. Anywhere like
Correct.
50 rupees also, they're like, it's becoming little difficult. See, value addition, everything is little similar what every tech product is doing in my segment. Soil test is a soil test, 14 parameter, 14 parameter. What more extra I can give is I can give an advisory, I can give follow-ups. All that remains same. So the value addition is same, what everybody is giving, even I'm giving 2 parameters. Like, I mean, that's not a big difference to a farmer. So only I could play was the price. That's how I had betted. I entered with that. Now that has become a problem for me only. How do I increase the price?
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to figure it out, and maybe anybody in the cohort also could help me out. And like, I'm little struggling with this part currently, as it has come on the unit economics, cost, launch price, and all that.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. That's all from my end. I mean, I'm looking out, seeking out for help and suggestion from everyone in this very aspect. And is it required, or see if I be in that price only, I'll just be there. I'll
Correct.
not go. I'll not grow. But for me to visible, as you told, jo dikhta hai wo bikta hai, even we understood very lately. So strong product will not win. The one which is in the mouth of the farmers will win. We've identified
Correct.
this. So that's why I have launched this, but now I'm finding it difficult. Or should I go or not with the higher price? When should I go? That's also a question for me.
Correct. 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 Um, just on that point, right? So the next, a couple of slides that I have on, and I don't know if this is going to directly address your concern, Sudha, but let's try. Let's see where we get to it, and maybe this doesn't completely also apply to you because what we're looking at, the couple of sort of brands that I'm going to be talking about, are looking at premium products at the end of sort of the cycle, right? But let's see what we can sort of think about. How do we sort of address some of your concerns here? Now, there are two brands that I'm going to be talking about. One is Araku Coffee, and the next one is going to be BioRay, right? Now, why am I talking about this, and what about customer acquisition and retention becomes interesting here, and how this also connects back to one of the points that I want to be making in terms of going back to what we were talking of a private good versus a public good, and how do you then what are the kind of funding and financing strategies that we need to look at, especially for restoration related businesses, right? Um, so what it really boils down to is same until say a decade back, it was a very it was always about premium versus BOP. BOP is the bottom of the pyramid. And I think that is the kind of correct me if I'm wrong here, Sudha. Bottom of the pyramid is the kind of customers that Sudha is dealing with. Whereas an Araku Coffee, who's got two branches, I think they've got one in Bangalore and they've got one in Paris. They are dealing with premium coffee drinkers, right? Um, Now, both of them have a willingness to pay, but in the case of Sudha, it's there is a high amount of price sensitivity as compared to someone who's consuming an Araku coffee because it's a premium brand. The price sensitivity there would be much lower. Now, the question that comes to and what we should ideally be asking when dealing with pricing strategies is not necessarily maybe a well premium versus BOP may not be a completely entirely will not may not be a completely stupid question as far as Sudha is concerned. But I think a more appropriate question would also be in terms of who has the willingness to pay versus who needs the cash flow engineering to be able to pay you, right? Again, I'm not sure if this applies, and happy to sort of brainstorm this with some of you here, especially in your cases. But what do I mean by cash flow engineering? It basically means that are there possibilities and strategies for getting the consumer to pay through multiple types of model, right? And the examples to draw out that some of these brands have been doing, and also can we look at other service-based brands and see if some of that can apply to our products and services as well, right? So what are the examples there? And what do I mean by cash flow engineering if I had to break it down? So look at your Netflix, your Spotify, your Geo Hotstar, and all of these streaming channels. Now they have two options. They have a monthly payout package for you, or they have like an annual subscription fee, right? Basically, on whatever your ability is, the discount is adjusted accordingly. So that is one, right? The second could also be in terms of the price. Another interesting example would be an Uber versus Rapido, and I don't know again how many of you have sort of know about this, but Uber used to be on a commission model with its drivers. So if you ride for say 500 rupees, Uber keeps like whatever 20%, 30%, and the rest goes to the drivers. Versus what Rapido went ahead with is a rental model, which basically more like a rental model, not necessarily a rental model. That and what it basically means is that you pay them per day to be using the Rapido platform to get rides, right? So even psychologically, a lot of drivers prefer to shift to a Rapido primarily because what it meant is if I'm paying 300 rupees as rental charges to use the platform, it's a platform fee, right? Then whether I ride for 8 hours, whether I ride for 10 hours, whether I ride for 15 hours, that doesn't change. And that is something which Rapido cracked very interestingly. And I was wondering if something of this kind is this is the kind of possibly the kind of innovation that we may have to do with pricing, considering the kind of competition that we have to deal with, especially in the sector that we're operating. So that was one thing to look at. Now, who pays for the public good, right? And this is where this is the point that I wanted to try and see if there are innovative ways to be looking at how do we price our products, especially because we're sort of like restoration companies here. Now, there are two companies that I'm looking at. First of all, let's start with Araku, right? Now, all of us know that the basis on which Araku, first of all, Araku came into being not as a coffee company. And I don't know how many of you know the backstory, but Mahindra Foundation, I think it was Nanhi Kali that ended up, if I've not got the name of the foundation wrong, they ended up being in the Araku Valley, and their objective was to was to get girls to school, right? How do we improve the retention rates of girl students in the schools in the valley? And that was the starting point. It was also health. So it was public health and education, and that was the mandate of the foundation in Araku. And that's when they figured out that the primary issue that they needed to address was livelihoods. And in the livelihood space, what they needed to address was something specifically to do with one commodity, which is coffee. Which is why the whole journey of Araku Coffee for a good 8 to 10 years was only investing in the landscape, was only investing in education and public health as far as the local community was concerned. And this was paid for by the foundation until the Araku brand was ready to explode in the market, right? Um, Now, that is one example. Now, in the case of Biore, which is a sustainable cotton company based out of Madhya Pradesh, and again, look them up. Um, uh, if you look at what they have to offer, um, sustainable seeds, which means everything from giving seeds to the farmers to ultimately picking up the product from the farmers, is something that is taken care of by them. In addition to that, community benefits from schools to public health, as well as they've now expanded into commodities, cereals, etc. Um, which is so there are two components to this, right? There's a public good component to it, and then there is the commodity component to it. The commodity in this case is sustainable cotton. In the case of Araku coffee is coffee. Now, the revenue that is earned from the commodity pays for the production of the commodity. But there is another commodity that is being produced at the back of all of that, which is carbon, biodiversity, soil, and water. And the customer may not always be willing to pay for it, right? And this is where what we need to be doing, as a sector, is seeing how we can stack up capital. I know you've had a session previously on what are the different types of capital, from grant to subsidy, that can be deployed, and maybe there is a need to be able to break this down a little bit. I know we're short on time, and I'm not going to get into the nitty gritties of this, but maybe I can share something post this session with you guys. But seeing what part of and what component of your entire business can be paid for that is what the public good covers versus what the private good covers, and how do we differentiate between somebody who's willing to pay for the public good versus somebody who is willing to pay only for the private good, right? In some cases, it's a package deal, and a lot of people will say that it comes as a package deal. But one of the things that we've all struggled with is pricing of our commodities and getting the customer to pay for a premium product. And this is one way to think about it, which is slightly different from how a conventional business would go about its work, right? Now, again, I'll quickly go over the slide. And I think these are some of the critical pillars that we should look at when it comes to the GTM strategy, right? First is demonstration. I think for a lot of us, and I also would like to believe that a lot of you in this space are much ahead when it comes to demonstration. But at least in the space that we're operating, it's fairly clear that demonstration is the way to go, right? Uh, so the two examples from the private sector that have done this really well today, one is Eureka Forbes. It's a slightly older company, but if you actually look at their strategy way back, say a decade and a half back, it was door to door, like door to door, going and talking to people about water filters, right? Today, it's a no-brainer for a lot of us living in urban areas, at least. The same with Jane Drip. Jane Drip irrigation, demo plots, subsidy, financing. It was the entire package with which they went to the farmer that made it so appealing. So demonstration is critical and important. Second is operationalizing the trust layer, right? And this is where Zerodha is a very interesting example, but I would also like to believe that Zerodha is an outlier. Primarily because Zerodha worked with, first of all, it's bootstrapped. It's still bootstrapped. Zerodha, for those of us who don't know, is It's a fintech company, and it mainly works in the space of dealing with stocks. It's a sort of a brokerage firm, and one of its main innovations was digitizing the process of the documentation that was required to purchase stocks on the market, right? So that is something that they take a lot of pride on. They did it way back in 2008, 2009. But the way Zerodha functioned was actually through and still functions is through referrals mainly. And second, they customer education, right? Same with Dehat, right? For some of you who know about them, the Dehat Center became the focal point of getting the customer to adopt practices that were more regen agriculture friendly, while also showing them how cost savings could happen on their plots, right? So that's these are like two unique examples which go beyond conventional marketing. The third is that emotion sometimes does sell, and not just features, right? And that is critical to be triggering, especially towards triggering a behavioral shift, right? Um, for example, in the case of any clean commodities that you look at in the market, like a lot of households, especially urban households today, are really sort of driven by words such as clean, um, clean, green, pesticide-free, organic. And sometimes that also sort of sells an emotion. In fact, I think most of the advertising that you see around sells on emotion rather than features. If you look at any of the typical ad campaigns that have been run over the past 2-3 decades, none of them will talk about features, right? They all will pick an emotion or a perceived customer image that they have that makes you look cool because you use it, or because you drink this, or because you consume this. It makes you the cool one, right? And I think that is something that we need to sort of capture in a way. Finally, it's aligning commercials to cash flow, and that's your payment models, right? If there is some innovation that you can bring about in payment models, at the risk of not messing up your unit economics, it's worth exploring that, especially if you're operating in a very sort of, which most of us are, in a price sensitive market. That is something that you can look at. This is my last slide, so I'm going to quickly go over this. And this is where there's a lot of learning from Safe Harvest in terms of why visibility is critical, right? Safe Harvest being a B2C brand, and they've understood this the hard way, that visibility and ad spend, especially with algorithms today, on any kind of online platforms, really changes the game for a lot of companies, right? Which is why they end up investing in buying ads, buying influencers, and things like that. It really depends on your capacity, your capability to be able to invest in something like that. But at least the most experienced ones that you talk to, all of them will tell you that it matters. And the visibility matters not just in terms of ad spend, right? It also matters in terms of just where your product is kept on the shelf. Like this is I think well known across many sort of learnings that we've had. Just the placing of your product at a specific place on the shelf really changes the game. Similarly, this is something that a friend of mine, again from Safe Harvest, was telling me, that when someone is looking for a product or a commodity on a quick commerce website, they may not necessarily look for your product or commodity. What they're searching for is something that they know. So they won't search for washing powder. They are searching for surf, right? And that is where there's a high possibility that that's the kind of competition that you're dealing with. And it's good to be aware of some of these things, and therefore exploring channels that work best for you. Promo spends again. Safe Harvest has been doing this for a very long time. That this is something. It's something that is being leveraged by a lot of brands today, and flexibility in payment systems. I've covered some of this. So levers that and these are I know these are learnings from FMCG groups, as well as from people who are today in the B2C market, and would be good to hear from you if you've had any good bad experiences with applying some of these strategies, if it's worked for you, it hasn't worked for you, especially around flexibility in payment systems, etc. Because one of the things that I also understand, and especially for the kind of communities that we are working with and for the kind of products we're dealing with, that managing cash flow is a critical problem, right? Especially if you're in the ag tech, or just the agriculture space generally, because your cash flow is very closely tied to the cash flow of the communities that you're working with, is very closely tied to when your customer pays you. And managing some of those things and managing some of those payment cycles also becomes very critical while you think about everything else. I'm cognizant of the fact that those are some of the ground realities that we're working with. But yeah, these are three levers that have at least worked for some of the brands that I've spoken to. Yeah, that's all I have. But would love to now hear from some of you in terms of, you know, if you have anything to share on your strategies around customer acquisition, what has worked for you, what is not. Also, if you don't agree with some of the points here, happy to learn that from you as well. Yeah, over to you, Ananya and June.
Yeah, I think Dr.
Yes,
Manisha from
yes, Dr.
Openfield,
Manisha.
has raised her hand.
Hello, thank you so much for the. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr.
Yes, thank you so much, Karishma ji, for your insights. Definitely useful. So, in our case, we are basically building the community-linked infrastructure layer for the forest economy.
Yeah.
That has an inclusion of local processing systems and traceability, and the stronger market linkage around seasonal forest produce. From there, began introducing products like Mahua, Chironji, Roselle, and other seasonal produce which is coming out from the community, which is closer to the forest, through food shows and a lot of hospitality networks who opened into dehydrated or a value-added farm products, which is coming from directly from the forest. This definitely gave us, useful market signals, especially around which segments we were open to experimentations, premium sourcing, and consumption, conscious consumption. So at the same time, it also showed us that our impact alone is not enough, definitely. So different segments respond to different kinds of value. And we need to translate this forest linked impact into clear product sourcing and business value for the payer. That was one of the understanding what we had. My question from this is, how do we test whether buyers are paying for the actual product value and sourcing reliability rather than to only responding positively to an impact story?
Right. Um, I would not underestimate the buyer. As I've said before, I think most customers, again, it really depends on when you say a buyer, who is your customer, right? Is it institutional? Is it a company? Is it or are you dealing directly with customers, right? Who are just consuming your products? So first of all, that segmentation is important to be able to answer your question. Second, the second, I think the indicator, again, like I said, it's about repeat orders, right? I think that becomes a good indicator to understand if what is because a repeat. When it comes to if you're if you're buying from a company because of just impact and goodwill, you'll buy from them once, you'll buy from them twice. But if the commodity and the service is not good and something that you're not satisfied, you're not going back to them, right? You've done your bit as far as goodwill is concerned. I think, which is why customer retention is one of the better indicators of knowing if your commodity is working for your buyers. and if the service is working for them. So I think that is that would be one clear-cut way of understanding this. Also, if another way to sort of also establish a category is, would you have more of similar customer profiles, right? Also think about that. So suppose if you're dealing with, say, hotels, or you're dealing with like a luxury brand, do you have just one of them in your sort of portfolio, or do you have like multiple, say, luxury brands now coming to you? So that could also be another indicator to look at if your commodity is catering to that market, versus if it's just your impact story is what is more powerful for your customers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no other questions or any, there's nothing in the chat box. I think as Aparajita and Payal mentioned, it'd be great if you could all turn on your videos for a couple minutes. We just want to take a screenshot for the socials. So, yeah.
Even if there's some questions, we can take them. I meant that we can take the screenshot
No, sure.
while
I
the
mean,
session is
while we're
going on.
waiting, yeah.
Yeah. So if any questions from the cohort members, I know that we weren't able to take out enough time for the Q&A as outlined. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat box, or if you're in a low bandwidth area, or voice it out here. Okay, I don't see any hands. So thank you so much, Karishma. So a really great session. I think there were a lot of stories, and I think the cohort members are still absorbing a lot that you had to share with them. What we do is, after some of these, all of these sessions, we put out a social media post with the key insights and a picture of the entire room. So for that, we're requesting everyone to turn on their videos. Payal will be helping us with a screenshot of the room.
Done the screenshot. I've taken the screenshot.
Thanks. Thanks for this session, Karishma, from my side as well. I think very interesting. There are a lot of relevant examples, and it's not necessary. And I think we've seen this year after year across cohorts, right? That just because examples come from certain categories which may not be completely relevant to your business doesn't mean there aren't lessons to take away. In fact, I think we've seen some of the most powerful lessons come from categories that are related, right? And they are not exactly same category. A lot of useful learning. So I think you've covered a sort of a breadth of examples, which is quite enriching. And I'm sure if there are questions or any thoughts that the cohort wants to share, we'll also get back to you with those. But just before we leave you, maybe a quick question to Sudha ji. Sudha, the question that you had raised earlier, do you think the slides that Karishma had covered in that discussion, at least part of your question was answered or something was addressed?
A little take me on a lighter note. I now feel like I should start a D2C company also. I found it more lucrative, jokes apart. But few of them, like Nirma, I was able to relate what she had presented. Because India mein, like very bottom line, as it the cost is a very big factor to play around. We are little struggling, so I'm trying to relate myself, still absorbing. And few of the things I could relate, because even the Araku, even I have been following up that case today. Akshay Kalpa, we have met the founder. So I have taken a lot of lessons from them personally also, and we are also trying to grow and diversify our range of products. Maybe I would want to have a little small discussion with you, Karishma, if you don't mind. Maybe of 10 minutes, you can give me a
I'm happy
little
to
time. Yeah. So I just wanted to, I cannot tell in the whole cohort what is that we are trying to enter into, because even we understood only soil may not work it out.
Sure.
How the story of Araku has gone in. We don't want to enter D2C, but relative to farmer, and then how we become sustainable and make them sustainable is my plan now. It's not like
Right.
we only earn it. We have come up with a model which is called a soil partner. Maybe I would like to tell that. So we are going with something called as revenue sharing model. So that's how it is becoming a hit in the rural sector. they're earning through our technology. But I'm having again a little struggle there because it's a kind of public directly. The model is going in the public. You had put a relation, give an example with the brand. Now we also want to become a brand, but with people earning through us. That's what we wanted to create a story, curate the story. You have touched on many points, like what do you call? दिखता है बिकता है and see we you have put up a lot of points which completely related to me. So we are trying to build something which was never being used. Soil testing is not a habitual thing. So we are trying to create awareness, make a new product. My segmentation is little. I have to work on that. Even I know. So that's how I'm little seeking your help also. Maybe Divya also could join in. Miss Divya, I would like to have a discussion with both of you a little on this. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes is more than enough because I'm trying to evolve. And I'm kind of. It's not like validation. However, I'm trying it, but it would save my time not going too much place around, but just stick to one or two what people who have gone through this and are somewhere ahead of me. That's what is the whole request I would like to put in. But I had related to what you had told. It was a great session. I think I had been fully interactive in the session. So that's how Ms. Divya has been asking whether it's relative to you or not. Yeah, it was related.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Sudha. So if there are no more questions or thoughts, then Karishma, we can say bye to you. Thank you so much. Sorry, I see a hand up from Siba. Siba, please.
That's okay, Divya. So I just wanted to thank Karishma for such a insightful session. Like you rightly said that, we try to do a lot of things, but we miss out on very basics. And one of the basics that I learned a few years back and which you very well reiterated today was that ठीक है हमें कम्युनिटी के लिए काम करना है हमें environment के लिए करना है land restore करना है but if you are unable to really create a business model or a product that is selling and revenue is generating, you won't be able to do any of those. So, be it through, creating like a food product, like, the milk that you gave example of, or millet biscuits or anything, or it could be a service or a technology, it could be anything, but it's really important to go back to the very basics of business and look at it in that perspective. Because in the social space, I've seen, and even Gramya too, when we had started initially, Gramya started with a D2C brand, and we had no idea. We were just like youngsters कि हाँ हमें दुनिया बदलनी है और हमें ये करना है. We placed Gramya products on the shelves and we failed miserably. Like you mentioned that it's not just the product किस तरह से दिख रहा है या उसका क्या है. Customers won't be willing to pay and experiment unless they know the story behind it or what the product is really offering to them. So these are something really I just wanted to reiterate these things that are very basic and really key to a success of any social change also that we are trying to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Siba, for that.
Yeah, I think if you have no more questions, thank you so much, Karishma. Thank you so much for taking our inputs
Thank
and
you. Thank you,
spending this
everybody.
time with us.
It was lovely meeting all of you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I think Payal will be sharing the feedback form
yeah,
here. I know that we're
share.
out of time, but if all of you could please spend 5 minutes on the feedback form.
Should we share it over WhatsApp also, WhatsApp group as well?
We can do that. So that since we're out of time,
Because
let's
some
share it over
people
the
have
WhatsApp group.
already left.
Yes.
Yes,
I feel if
please
we
share it
join.
here and on WhatsApp.
Yeah, it's been a long 2 hours, so I'm sure everyone has other commitments to get to. Thank you everyone for staying with us throughout the session.